Hello, Ice Price Focus as Nottingham Forest look to push through a major striker signing, as well as, it seems, a loan deal for Aston Villa's Alex Moreno. We'll discuss all that and the first week of the Premier League season for the Reds in the company of, first of all, the Athletics' Paul Taylor. Tails, good to have you back with us. How are you?
Good morning. Every time I come on, those starting credits get more impressive.
Thank you.
Your budget must be getting bigger every week. What's going off?
It's all done through the generosity of Forest fans, actually. So yeah, they all help out. So thank you very much. Are you well?
I'm good, thank you. You?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Second guest is a debutant in BBC senior football news reporter Nick Mashiter. Nick, how you doing?
Good morning. You all right? Do we have to declare an interest about how long we've known each other?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, we've known each other a long time. You can tell people if you want.
I don't know. Are we allowed to mention the L word, the Leicester word, in a Forest press conference? The Forest sort of podcast.
That's true. We went to Leicester Uni together, and we were on the student paper. I don't even know if those still exist, but this is 20 years ago. Believe it or not, we are quite old. So yeah, known each other a long time. But good to have you with us. So are you okay? You were at the PFA Awards last night, so I'll ask if you're hungover.
No. Strictly professional. Absolutely not. No, it was very good night. Sadly, no awards for Forest, but no, it was really enjoyable night at the Manchester Opera House last night.
Next season. Third guest completing the panel is former Reds winger Paul Anderson. Good to have you with us as normal, Ando. How are you?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was going to speak about the credits as well. It is looking good.
Well, yeah, if you keep coming on, you'll find your way into them, I'm sure.
We'll be there. I'll make it one day.
Excellent. Kick us off. I'll call Paul Taylor Tails, and I'll call Paul Anderson Paul, so that people don't get too confused. Paul Anderson, kick us off just with your thoughts on the game. We were all there. What did you make of it on Saturday against Bournemouth? What did you like? What didn't you like?
I think first half, especially, you probably saw how Forest might start to dominate a few games, especially sort of in possession, out of possession. You're starting to see how they're going to press, and they're going to be really well organised. They've got a really good structure to the team, and obviously you don't want to talk about it too much, but with the injury, which made quite a long pause in the game, that can disrupt how things go, and especially 8 minutes into a new campaign. It's not always easy when you've planned all week, I assume, for how they're going to play against Bournemouth. So I think I'd like to think fans will be excited from what they've seen. It was just a little bit of a shame that don't want it to be the same old story, but need to be seeing teams off when you've got that dominance in the game at certain times. You need to be getting that second goal and just kill the opposition off, and unfortunately couldn't quite get there, and 5 minutes left, Bournemouth punish you with that. So some real positives from the game, but I think also Nuno will take a lot of learning from the game as well.
Regular viewers, Nick, will have seen Forest kind of play that second half out quite a lot last season, and look to see out a 1-0 and not quite manage it. Did you see it coming, Bournemouth scoring, or did you think Forest were fairly in control of the game?
I thought to a degree they were relatively in control, even though Bournemouth started to press. They got a little bit of momentum, and they had a little bit more possession in the second half. You're not going to dominate for 90 minutes, and there's as one manager told me, like, there's always 11 men trying to stop you from doing your job. And ultimately, I think Bournemouth did that quite well in the second half, but I didn't think that they looked like they were going to score unless it was going to come down to a Forest error, which ultimately it was, failing to clear the cross. So, yeah, I think you've got to give Bournemouth a degree of credit for sort of battling back in there and taking the chance where it came. But I did think for large parts that they weren't going to get there because they didn't really create an awful lot. I don't think Sells had an awful lot to do, which would be the disappointing thing for Forest.
What was Nuno like afterwards, Tails, in the press conference? Did you get the sense that probably a lot of fans came away feeling like it was 2 points dropped? Was that the internal feeling? Was that your feeling?
Do you know what? I think the injury to Danilo cast the biggest shadow over everything for Nuno as much as anybody. I think he talked very little about the game. He only made a few passing comments about the actual match itself. He was more concerned with Danilo and the horrific injury he picked up. That's mainly what he spoke about, and I think that's mainly what he would have been thinking about. Of course, he will analyse the game. He'll go over what went right and what went wrong. But I think in the immediate aftermath of that match, his main concern was losing a player that he had planned to rely on quite a lot this season. I think you would have seen Danilo starting quite a few games, particularly at home, where I think they felt like him and Sangare might make quite a good partnership in that two sat in front of the back four. So I think that was his major focus after the game.
Give us an update on Danilo. You reported that roughly 3 months. Is that 3 months before he's back in training? 3 months before he might be back on the pitch? I mean, either way, I think it's good news because it looks so bad. But what are you hearing?
Well, actually, the latest we're hearing is that Forest won't have a definitive answer just yet until they've had further specialist advice. They do think it's going to be in the region of 12 weeks, but until he's had some treatment and they've assessed how well that's gone, then they'll know better. But some people were saying that it might be as little as 8 weeks, but that feels a little optimistic to me. And I think the general ballpark of 12 weeks feels more realistic, given I've only watched the replays a few times because it was so horrific. But to put it bluntly, his ankle was facing the wrong way, so it's hard to see how somebody's going to come back from that in 8 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It looked, a massive relief if it's only, in inverted commas, 8-12 weeks. You've been there with bad injuries, Paul. I read you broke your leg. Is that the worst injury you've had? And what's kind of the toll it takes on you mentally, especially this stage of the season for Danilo, when you've done all that hard work? It's going to be tough for him to come back.
The hardest part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, what's the mental impact on him?
It is, and I think. Sorry, there's just a little bit of a delay on that. Look, pre-season is the hardest time of the season, and to do all of that work and it to happen so soon, is obviously mentally going to be difficult. I think, like Tails said, when you see how extreme the injury looked at the time, I was personally looking at probably 6 months, thinking that's going to be where he's going to be at. 3 months. I think there's a little bit of a carrot there. I know it's still 3 months, but you're looking, can you be back in and around it before Christmas? And look, serious injuries happen. It's football. It's elite sport. It is what it is. But hopefully, if it's just to do with the bone, so you say when I broke my leg, look, I missed 5 months. I was back training within 5 months, and I had quite a if you could ask for a broken leg, I had the perfect one. It was a clean break through my tib. There was no muscular damage, no ligament damage, nothing like that. So I didn't have to have it manipulated back into place or anything. So I had as nice a break as you could possibly have. So I had a relatively easy comeback, but it's the muscle wastage and it's the other bits that start to fade away sort of whilst you're doing your rehab. So there's so many contraptions and bits now that you can get put on your legs. It keeps your muscles working, so they're not wasting away. Forest will have the best devices in the world to help support with that. So my nervousness would be if there's any ankle ligament damage, any muscular damage. The movement in his ankle will be probably a restriction because it'll be locked in place for a certain amount of time, so you won't be able to get movement. So starting to get the movement back into the ankle joint will be something that will take time, and hopefully it will go back to normal within that 12-week period, whatever it be. But it might be something that he has to work with for the rest of his career now, unfortunately. And as a footballer, that's what you're doing. You're putting your body on the line, and that you're at risk of injury at any point throughout a game. So, look, sad. Tails mentioned it again about that's Nuno looking to build his squad and how his team's going to look, and that's a disappointment. But relatively positive news. 3 months is 3 months will fly by. It will, because within 6 weeks you'll be back doing stuff. You'll be back in there, so you can maybe have a week or so break, get the consultants, the specialists, to have a proper look at it and see where they're at. But to hear that news is really positive from a person point of view, forgetting being a player. From a person point of view, and you talk about mental health, it can really affect you. And I don't know what his family life is, and whether he's here on his own or whether he has his family in the country. I'm not sure. That'll obviously have an effect on him as well. So hopefully he's got good family and friends around him to support him in this short period.
Hopefully so. I know Murillo's close to him. I suppose, Nick, do you have to give credit to Forest the way they responded? They did really well that first half, and particularly what I want to get your take on the midfield. We debated it so much on the podcast of who should start. Yates came on, who wasn't in anyone's team, and I thought did really well. What did you make of the balance in Forest midfield and attack in general in that first half?
Yeah, I think having watched your friend, your teammate have such a serious injury, and obviously we're watching from the stands, and the blankets come out and start shielding from view, and you're starting to really get concerned. They only showed the replay once for us on the press box screens, which rather then immediately suggests how bad it is. So you're watching that on the pitch as your friends sort of getting carried off, and naturally that's going to be quite a mentally difficult thing to overcome. But as Nuno said in the press conference afterwards, they adapted really, really well, and they did they had a really, really good half. I think deserved to go in front, and to be able to just not shake it off, but mentally to go again, especially after I think about a 10-minute break in play, to be able to reset and go and play, I think, as well as they did, because I think they did play well in the first half, is sort of a credit kind of sort of to their professionalism, I guess, because what they would have witnessed wasn't very nice.
So what went wrong second half, Tails, then? Because you kind of expect the first half to be the bad one when you've seen your mate go out and you struggle mentally, you've got to regroup. They did really well first half. Second half was sort of chalk and cheese. Do we give credit to Bournemouth? Do we blame Forest for players for backing off? Do we point the finger at Nuno for his subs? It's easy to overread one game, but what was your take on it?
I think your last sentence probably sums it up. I think it felt like new season, same old Forest. But then you don't want to be too harsh, because the circumstances of it all were quite difficult. And I would say that, not to be overly critical of Nuno, but it was after they made some changes that they lost a bit of momentum. When they didn't have Callum Hudson-Odoi on the pitch or Anthony Elanga, and they altered things a little bit. I know they tried to freshen things up, but it didn't quite help their impetus. Partly that was probably due to Bournemouth, because they're a good team. They're established in the Premier League. They've got some good players, and I don't think a draw was the worst result when you put it in the perspective of, I think Forest had lost their last 4 or even 5 opening day fixtures. So a point is progress if you're trying to be a positive guy about it all. But it did feel like same old Forest a little bit, and they do need to start learning how to win matches like that if they're going to make the progression from being a team that fights relegation every season to being one that's more comfortable in mid-table, which I think they're very capable of doing. Then these are the kind of matches and situations that they need to come through and emerge with 3 points rather than just the one. They need to start learning how to be a bit more savvy in the Premier League, I think.
I wanted to get your take on, Ando, on the kind of lack of width in the second half. You were a winger, so obviously you would love to be out on the touchline, taking fullbacks on. We finished the game with Dominguez and Anderson kind of in a box midfield, which I definitely think can work. It didn't really work this time. Does it leave fullbacks kind of exposed as well, playing like that? Because Nico, I thought, had a tricky second half.
Potentially, I think if we a little bit from the last question, you do have to give credit to the opposition sometimes, because Forest were quite dominant for the first half, and in the Premier League, you're coming up against very good coaches. So the opposition coaches are going to make changes to counteract what your success has been in that first half. And when you're the ones that are on top, it can sometimes be difficult because you go, well, we keep doing the same thing because we're doing really well. So you keep doing that, but obviously the opposition are counteracting that, and they're changing things, and the manager's making changes throughout the game for that. And so I think you have to give a little bit of credit to Bournemouth, because they kind of halted what Forest were doing in the first half. And then when you're looking at the changes, it's really difficult as a manager. You've got to protect your players, because there's going to be loads of games coming up in the next few weeks. You've signed new players, so you need to be giving them a chance and giving them a bit of a go. I think it is difficult because Anderson's a different type of winger to Elanga, and Dominguez is a different winger to Hudson-Odoi. And like you say, they're probably more inverted wingers, which the modern football has become that a little bit. Having Elanga and Hudson-Odoi is quite rare. There's not loads and loads of wingers who stand on the touchline and just keep going at fullbacks. That's sort of gone out of the game a little bit. So look, you have to bring them in. Now, if you are being ultra critical, would it be better to have maybe more of a lopsided one? So it might be Anderson one side and Hudson-Odoi one side. So you've got an out-and-out winger and an inverted winger, or the opposite way, obviously, with Dominguez and Elanga. It's easy to be critical because you go, well, Bournemouth started to get on top. That's football. Generally, a team who's a goal up ends up being the one who defends, unless you're a Liverpool or you're a Man City who dominate so much possession. Generally, that happens. And again, if you start to look at Bournemouth's substitutes, they'd have been making attacking substitutes to try and get back into the game. I think if you actually look at it, and something that I took from the game, I think Bournemouth have been a bit of a bogey team for Forest over the past few years. And Tales, you mentioned there about these are the games where Forest need to be seeing out and they need to be getting 3 points. You're exactly right. But getting a point against Bournemouth rather than losing the games, because what was it last season? Was it 3-0?
I think it's 8 games they've not beaten them in, or 9 now.
Yeah, so you go in, but they've improved that against a team who always seem to cause them a problem. So are they taking those steps? And it's the first game of the season, like you say, you've got a point rather than losing. There might be progression there. I know I'm probably trying to be positive with it. But again, you've not lost your first game. You've got a point. You're getting all the players on the pitch that need to be there. And it's something to build on. And I'm sure Nuno will be gutted that he's not taking the 3 points, because I think Forest fully deserve the 3 points. But also, like I said in the first one, you've got to be clinical at that top end, and you need to be scoring goals to punish the opposition when you're on top.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm not critical of Nuno's subs is you've only got 3 sub windows. You've used one after 8 minutes. The second one, I think, was in force. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tales or Nick, but Aina was injured or Elanga was injured. So then you think, well, I'm 50 minutes in. Do I bring Jota Silva on, who's not played a Premier League minute? So you probably need to take the safe option with Dominguez. And then Sosa's just signed, so you can't bring him on for Hudson-Odoi. So I feel like I'll give Nuno a pass on that. I've been critical of his subs, being a bit negative last season, but not so much this season. I mean, just last year on the game, Nick, did it look to you like 2 teams who are going to be in that kind of 12th to 17th bracket, which we're pitching for? I mean, maybe Bournemouth are a little better than that, but do Forest kind of pitch up in that area of the table from what you've seen from one game?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and it would be wrong to kind of start pigeonholing teams after one game, because there's still players to come back. The transfer window's not finished. I think you've got to take stock after August 31st to sort of look what teams are playing with and what they can utilise. Obviously, it was probably the best time, if there's a good time to play teams, a good time to play Bournemouth, it's probably the best time to play Bournemouth, because they were without Solanke. Naturally, obviously, he's gone to Tottenham, and they were out with his 40 million replacement in Evanilson from Porto. So I thought they were pretty toothless to a certain extent, but then I felt that Iraola made quite a good case as to why they played like they did and how they played like they did, because of going behind they weren't able to, as he said, to play the game they wanted to. They had to kind of adjust. So I felt that, as I said before, they never really looked like scoring unless it was going to be from a Forest mistake. But it would be harsh and wrong to sort of start saying, well, they're going to finish 16th because of what we saw for 90 minutes. And we don't know if the new record signing is going to come in. He might come in and score 20 to 25 goals, and they'll be one of the surprise challenges for Europe or seventh place.
Just before we get to transfers, Tails, I take it you've not heard an update on Aina or Elanga. That wasn't raised in the press conference, was it, if they went off injured?
No, I don't think Aina's was a bad one. He looked like he got a knock of some sort, but he was able to get himself off the pitch of his own accord without any assistance. So you'd hope it's only something minor. No, he wasn't asked in the press conference, actually. It was all overshadowed by the Danilo thing. But I'm sure he'll be asked tomorrow in the pre-match press conference what the situation is behind it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. We'll pick up on left backs in 1 second, but just before we do, a word for the Trent navigation. 31st, straight after the Wolves game, get down there for the Oasis and gig, free entry, and you won't have to queue because of all the food courts, all the bars, all the staff that Greg Mitchell mentioned on Monday. So it should be a good gig, hopefully after a win. And thanks to the Nav, as ever, for their support. Left backs then, Tails. Alex Moreno looks like he's coming in from Villa. I know the Athletic reported it on Saturday. We've talked to us about how many times we've tried to sign him. It feels like this is maybe the third, is it?
It's definitely the second. It might well be the third. I know they've tried to get him before previously, and I think he himself might not have been too keen. But I think I did an interview with Paul a few weeks ago. So he made a very good point when we were chatting about how it feels like Forest are almost at a point where the dynamics changing a little bit, where for a couple of seasons, they've been a team that most people would perceive as being one that's fighting relegation. And now this is their opportunity this season to make themselves a more attractive prospect for potential signings. If they can establish themselves in the Premier League this season, then, they might find it easier to attract bigger names, for want of a better phrase. They might find it easier to attract players who might not have been as interested in joining Forest before and having that spectre of a potential relegation hanging over them. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get players like Moreno and Nketiah who might previously have thought twice about joining Forest now. Is this evidence that the perception of Forest within football and the way they're viewed by players, potential signings and other clubs is slowly starting to change a little bit? And they have done very good business this summer. I think when you look at them, I think they are a squad and a team that should be aiming a little bit higher, not getting carried away. I'm not saying they're going to challenge for Europe or anything, but I think mid-table should be an achievable and a realistic target. Lower mid-table should be somewhere that Forest can aim for and achieve this season.
It's so hard to bridge that gap, though, Nick. I was written down on my notes after I sent it to you guys. If you look at bridging the battle, the gap from relegation to mid-table, Brighton years, Palace years, Fulham years, Brentford lost in, but they were Premier League ready. The team you support couldn't do it. It's so hard to do it. You've got to spend a lot of money, I think, or be able to produce great players through your academy.
Yeah, I think last season 27 points would have kept you up. Luton went down with 26, and that is the lowest total since 2005. So whether that's going to be the case this season, and the not necessarily the quality, but the amount of points to keep you up, it's not 40 points anymore. It's not even, it's barely 35. It's not the magic. There's no magic number, and whatever that number might be appears to be dropping. So, as Tail said, I think they should be able to pull away from the bottom four, bottom five, and realistically, after everything that happened last season off the pitch, PSR and the doubt of what was going to happen and what was hanging over them for such a long time, the VAR issue towards the back end of the season. So it's not sexy and it's not glamorous, but I think there'll be a lot of people at Nottingham Forest that would bite your hand off for a season of anonymity, a season of just consolidation. It's not exciting, but tell you what, let's snap your hand off for 15th where nothing goes wrong and we don't end up on the front pages or the back pages. Let's just have that, and that would be progress to be able to say, right, okay, well, we're going to go into another season in the Premier League next year on the back of a mid-table finish, a comfortable one if possible, and then we can push on again. It's not going to get people, it's not going to get bums off seats and people standing up and applauding too much if we say, right, well, 15th, 14th, 15th would be great, but honestly, I do think that would be progress, and just to sit there and not make waves. It's a strange way to kind of put it, but to be able just to consolidate quietly, I think that would be progress for Forest this season.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Just on the left back thing, Paul, Alex Moreno's super attacking. Like, I think if he's got a weakness, it's probably defensively, but he really gets forward for Villa, and when he was at Betis, he got loads of assists. Does that indicate to you that kind of that Nuno does want to press, does want to play that high intensity game throughout the season that we sort of saw first half?
Yeah, I think you've started to, coming into the third season of the Premier League, the squad feels pretty Premier League ready, let's be honest. And when you start bringing in players like that, and you've mentioned about Moreno maybe not having the interest, whether it was him or whether it was the club not willing to part with him, depends on managers now. So players won't always just go, oh, let's go to Nottingham Forest, what a big club, blah, blah, blah. Like they might have looked at it and gone, look, Steve Cooper's done a fantastic job for the club. Like, he did an unbelievable job to get Nottingham Forest to where they are. But players will go, I'm not really sure of his style. If you're cemented in the Premier League and you're a Premier League player and you want to be dominating the ball and you want to be attacking as a fullback, I'm not sure Steve Cooper's maybe the perfect manager for that. Now, I have huge respect for Steve Cooper. I think he's done a fantastic job wherever he's gone. Hopefully not so much this season, but he's done a fantastic job. So someone like Moreno might start looking at that and going, right, Forest are going to start playing an attacking style of football here and a nice brand of football. I'm interested in that. And you've both mentioned that you're probably expecting Nottingham Forest to be lower mid-table. That's probably the aim, and I think Nick would hit the nail on the head, really. It's one of those seasons that you don't want to hear Nottingham Forest in the papers. I know you mentioned it's crazy that obviously, yeah, amazing, get Europe and all of that. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. You need to cement yourself as a Premier League club. This is the season to do it. Next season, you're then probably attracting even bigger names, even bigger players who are in the Premier League. You've got Origi last year, who's done whatever he's done in the Premier League and played for some of the best clubs in Europe. You're probably starting to attract players like his name, but who are in the prime. So I think the club's getting there. You're starting to get players going, okay, Nottingham Forest, great location, great club, Premier League club. It's quite an attractive place for people to come to, I would imagine.
Let's talk about strikers then, being an attractive place to come to. It looks like we're trying to get one in, Tails, Nketiah or Santiago Gimenez. I see Fabrizio Romano's just tweeted that we made a second bid for Gimenez. So if you need to disappear after this to chase that up, if you need to go in the next few minutes, that's fine. But he's saying we've bid 30 million. What are your thoughts on the striker battle? What are you hearing? Are we definitely going to bring one in, or might we still end up, not going for some mad last minute deal and ending up still with Taiwo and Chris Wood come the end of the window?
I think they still definitely. I don't think there's a world in which they sign Gimenez and Nketiah. I think there's only one of the two will sign, if any. And the Gimenez news is actually slightly surprising, because what we were hearing yesterday was that the player himself was not overly enthused about the idea of coming to Forest. So you wonder if there's a bit of poker going off here, where they might be just making it clear to Arsenal that they've still got other options as well. it's going to be interesting to see how that one pans out. And that honestly has caught us out a little bit, because I was absolutely convinced yesterday that Nketiah was going to be the one that was their absolute primary target and the one they were really going to push for. So my initial instinct is that there might be a little bit of a game of poker going off here. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, Nketiah would be an excellent signing, and Gimenez would be an excellent signing for different reasons. They're slightly different players, but both of them would certainly improve the options Forest have got up front. And I do think you need 3 frontline strikers. I know they've got other players that can play up front without naturally being out and out forwards, but I think you need at least 3, particularly given a 1 year's injury record. And Wood's not the youngest player now. I know he's scored 12 in 17 under Nuno. His record under Nuno is fantastic, and you hope that continues. But they do need another one.
Yeah, I think like the world, you boys will know better than me. The world of football agents is a bit murky. Like, are we putting this out to put pressure on Nketiah to accept a deal? Because there were reports yesterday he didn't want to take a wage drop and all that stuff. I'll ask you about that in a second. But Forest fans, Nick, have kind of turned their nose up at Nketiah. And I don't think he's a bad player, actually. I think he's pretty decent. And for the market we're pitching in and where we're trying to get to, I certainly take him. What's your read on, you'd have seen Nketiah. Is he rubbish, as some fans are saying? I don't think he is.
No, he's the under-21, England under-21 record goal scorer. And Marseille were very keen on him. I believe that was quite close from his end, and he was quite keen to go that way. Has he been given the chance? I mean, he's I think since his debut at Arsenal, he's only started he started 38 games in the league for Arsenal in 7 years. So that's only one season of starts in 7 seasons. So look, it's hard to be able to do that at Arsenal. You have to be an exceptionally good player. But who's to say that if he doesn't get a consistent run of games, if he comes to Nottingham Forest and starts 30 times and becomes the main man, who's to say that if he gets the chance, he's not going to score them? So he is a good player. He's not young anymore though. He's 25. For his own career, he needs to start looking to go and play consistently as well. That looks like it's going to be away from Arsenal, but I think 30 million. If that's the figure being spoken about, it's quite high, but that's where the market is right now. The market's skewed, and if that's the price that Forest have to pay or are willing to pay, that's the price. But you can't get around that. You can't hang that around the player's head because it's not their fault. They're not sitting there dictating how much they're gonna go for or how much clubs have to pay for them. But he's a good, say he's not young English player anymore, and probably just needs to find another home and just have a consistent season of starting games elsewhere to just be able to prove himself in the Premier League, because he's had the opportunities at Arsenal, maybe not taken them, but on the flip side of that, it's not like he's had the consistent opportunities. And if you're not doing that, you're not getting into a rhythm. You're not playing every Saturday, every Tuesday. It's really hard to get going again if it's so stop-start.
Yeah, and like Nick says, Paul, strikers are such a premium. Solanke's 65 million, so Nketiah is going to be roughly half that, I'd say, or maybe a little bit lower ideally. But that goes as well. Is there an element of a gamble whenever you sign a striker for big money, whether it's Gimenez, who's coming from the Dutch league, whether it's Nketiah, who hasn't got necessarily the goals that you'd hope for? There's going to be a risk for Forest because they're not shopping at the top end of the market, are they?
No, and I think any player you sign, for whether they're free or you're paying money, there's always an element of risk. Are they going to fit into the squad? Are they going to gel with people? And the thing with strikers is actually, yes, you're paying for someone to stick the ball in the back of the net, but you've also got to look at how the team are performing. So if the team aren't going to dominate the ball and they're not going to have loads of opportunities and final third entries, then your striker's not going to get many chances to score goals. So you can't always blame the striker. But I think if you're starting to look at the competition within the squad, you go, look, a Wanye, Wood, yeah, okay, they're okay, they're doing the job. They've both been massive for the Premier League survival in the last couple of seasons. Between them, they've kept the club up. So you have to give huge credit to them. And Woody's been, like you say, his stats are really, really good. They're really positive. Wanye's obviously had the injuries, but he gets back to full fitness. He's a real problem in the league. So you've got two great strikers there already. And if you bring one or the other in to bring that competition, I think it's only going to help Forest go the right way. And unfortunately, the market is the market, and the cost is the cost. And Forest will either be prepared to pay the money or they won't. Arsenal will either accept the money or they won't. The players will accept the wages they're offered, or Forest will accept the demands that either player wants. And I think, Tails, you mentioned there that Gimenez is. You mentioned a game of poker. Are Forest doing it to try and edge Arsenal along? But then Gimenez could be doing it to say, oh, I'm not interested, to push his wages along. Because at some point, someone's going to have to blink at some point. So it either doesn't happen, or someone somewhere is going to miss out on something, and it'll either be Nketiah's wage, it'll either be paying a little bit more from Forest's point of view, or someone accepting less wages than they expected. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy market. And someone somewhere will blink. And look, you never know what happens this weekend. Someone might, hope it doesn't happen, but someone might get an injury which forces someone's hand, or Nketiah might be told, you're playing no minutes whatsoever. If you look at the Sterling situation at Chelsea, you might get a complete different bit of information come from the football club, which forces your hand a little bit to move. And like I say, someone somewhere will blink, and hopefully it works in Forest's favour, and they'll have another striker. I cannot imagine they'll go for two. They'll have another striker in there, and you never know, someone else could come out of the woodwork that's not been made available yet, and someone like a Sterling, who I'm not saying he would come here, but someone like that who's not going to get the minutes they were maybe hoping for. There's been stranger things that have happened on a transfer deadline day, and you're getting closer and closer to that. So someone's going to have to make a decision at some point. Yeah,
I think so. There's no prospects of Taiwo going potentially, is there, Tails? I can't see it myself, but I don't know if you've heard anything about that, or any other outgoings as well. I guess Joe Worrell's probably top of the list, but probably will it be more of those kind of outgoings we see, touch wood, before the end of the month?
Yeah, I think there was some interest in Taiwo earlier in the summer, but I don't think there's never been any suggestion. I think West Ham were one of the ones keen. I don't think there's ever been any suggestion that Forest were in any way keen to sell him. I think it would almost be not a backward step, but a sideways step if they sell a Wanye and sign another striker. Then they've still only got two strikers. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. In terms of players going out, you've mentioned it. I think Joe Worrell, Hwang Wee-jo, Emmanuel Dennis. There's a few fringe players there who do need, for their sake, as much as anything, to go and find themselves a new club to go and play some football, because you don't want to be sat around like Harry Arter was for 2 or 3 years. I'm sure he was quite happy with it by the end, I think. But for Forest's point of view, you don't want to be wasting money paying players who aren't going to play. So yeah, they probably need to get some players out the door before the transfer window shuts, just to, that'll help the PSR situation as well.
Just lastly on strikers as well, Nick. I mentioned Nketiah's wage earlier. There was something on Twitter that he wouldn't take a cut on his 120 grand a week wage. I read elsewhere it might be 100 grand a week. Forest fans kind of kicking up a fuss about that. But is that actually the going rate for a decent Premier League striker? Whatever we think about it, something in that ballpark is kind of what you have to pay, isn't it, these days, if they played in the Premier League already?
Yeah, the the market rate is the market rate. If you want to get players from top clubs like Arsenal, then you're going to have to brace yourself to take a bit of a financial hit, because even in the Championship, there are players on 30, 40 grand, which is great. Well, but it's hard to see. And again, it goes back to sort of the transfer fees. If Eddie Nketiah wants to go and play, brilliant, go and play. Don't sit there and not waste your career, but lose a couple of years out of it. But if that's what he's getting paid right now, why should he look to take too much of a hit if he feels that that's what I'm worth? And if he's able to negotiate that with Forest or whoever else, I believe that personal terms were agreed with Marseille a few weeks ago, then why not? I don't think you should turn around and say to players, you can't have this and you can't have that, if currently what the market value and the going rate is what the going rate is. And I heard last night around that those figures that you spoke about, we were talking about it last night at the PFAs, and that's around the region of what I think he's expected to be on. So strikers are a premium, goals win games, and you have to pay. If you want to get those strikers in, you have to pay the money ultimately. If you can find that,
just on that, Nick, deals can be done. So Arsenal, if Arsenal want to get rid of him, let's say, and he's on, let's use 100 grand as simple terms. Let's say Forest are prepared to pay 75 grand. I don't know what it is. Well, however long he's got left on his contract, Arsenal need to pay him 25 grand a week of that for however to pay him out. He can get his payments, so his money's still the same. And if he backs himself, which I imagine playing in the Premier League he does, take your 75 grand a week at Nottingham Forest, go and prove everyone wrong, and then go and get yourself a move to a top 6 club like Solanke's done and get whatever amount of money more than what you're earning at Arsenal. So if you try and force a situation, I'm sure his representatives are doing this. It's not like, oh, well, it's just all expected on Forest, because Forest, let's be honest, aren't Arsenal at the minute. You can't compete with Arsenal. So there can be clever ways to make it happen, and Arsenal have to accept. Are they going to pay someone 100 grand a week and not play, or are you going to pay someone out the door and give them an opportunity? There's deals can be done.
It's better if they can subsidise something.
Yes,
and come to an agreement, and which is best for everybody, because, as I said, he's 25, Eddie Nketiah now. He needs to go and play, and as Paul rightly said, if he goes and comes to Forest and shows everybody what a good player he is, then, as we've seen with Dominic Solanke took not necessarily Bournemouth a step back, but at Chelsea and Liverpool, he managed to wasn't able to kind of break through there as much as I'm sure he wanted to, but then goes to Bournemouth, has that maturity and learns and proves to everybody what a good player he is, and gets the goals and also gets his move to Tottenham. So if you want to make a comparison in terms of Eddie Nketiah, that's probably a fairly decent one.
I think it's also not the first time that Forest would have paid £100,000 a week to a player. I think Chris Wood, if he isn't on that, he's on something close to that. And Divock Origi was on it more than that. So, it's not a landmark moment for Forest to suddenly be paying 100 grand for a player for the first time. If it does happen, it's not new territory. They're just, I think, as we've already said, they're just paying what the market rate is for a striker who brings goals in the Premier League.
Yeah. And they're willing to, like I say, incentivise players to move out of London to come to Nottingham. I mean, I'm saying that sometimes they might pay a steep wage to get someone in. We've probably seen it, like, they got Navas. Obviously, he was on big money, but Dean Henderson, Hudson-Odoi, I guess, is an example, Tails, to come out of London and rebuild his career as well. So there is some precedent there, like you say. Just before we go quickly, on the goalkeeping situation, Tails, as well, that's probably the last area of potential business, you think, where we might look to strengthen the 11?
Yeah, it seems to have gone a bit quiet on that front. I know they were interested in Sam Johnston at Palace, but nothing seems to have moved forward with that. There was less of an interest, but still some passing interest in Ramsdale, although I think that's faded in more recent weeks. I don't think they've prioritised making any kind of move for him at all. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Matt Sells has been, since he signed, he's been okay. He's been all right. He's not made any massive howlers. He's not made any clangers, which in the nicest possible way is probably a step forward from where Forest were before. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about going into the season with Matt Sells as first choice. But, if they can strengthen there and bring in somebody again that's better, which is what they've done all summer, adding players like Sosa and Anderson and the other new additions they've made, all will seem to have made Forest stronger. If they can do that in the goalkeeper position again, then great. I'm all for it. I think, it would only add to that belief that Forest are on the right path and slowly progressing season by season into something more than, as we mentioned, a team that is just fighting relegation every year.
Last question before we go. Nick's got to check out of his hotel in about 13 minutes, so we'll keep it brief. One question for you, Ando, before we go. Just on Southampton at the weekend, it feels like a really good kind of barometer, a good test of where we are. I know they're a promoted club, but it sounds like they played well at the weekend. First home game back in the Premier League. The fans will be up for it. Are you looking forward to this game as a good test for Forest?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you look at the clubs that have come up, you would probably suggest Leicester a Premier League club. They went down when they probably shouldn't have done with the players they had and the money they'd spent. You look at Southampton and Ipswich, the two other teams that have come up that have a really nice modern style of football. And we talk about Russell Martin's football, how it's total soccer. And I think from what I hear, they were totally dominant against Newcastle. However, they had a man sent off, didn't they? Was it Newcastle?
Yes, yeah.
So it makes it easier playing against 10 men when you play that style of football. So it'll be interesting to see because they're attacking, but I know that they're vulnerable at the back. Southampton will be vulnerable at the back. So if you've got players like Hudson-Odoi and Elanga who any type of speed and pace will cause problems for opposition teams, especially if you're going to play them on the break a little bit. Not to suggest that Forest will give up possession, because I think both clubs will try and play be a possession-based team, Forest and Southampton. So it'll be an interesting game. But again, if Forest want to be a Premier League mid-table team, which is what they're probably hoping for this season, these are the games that you have to go and win.
I think so. Although I take a point. We'll pick up on that discussion tomorrow probably. But if people have enjoyed this, do us a favour. Hit like on the video. Do subscribe. You can become a channel member. And do leave a lovely 5-star review on iTunes. Right, Nick, it's been really good to have you. And I know you've got a dash, so we'll let you go. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Tails, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back on soon, both of you. And you as well, Paul Anderson. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Like I say, we'll be back tomorrow with a full match preview, Friday opposition preview, and then Saturday post-match. If we don't see you for those, we shall hopefully see you soon.